Okay. Nice to see you all, and thanks for joining us, Rainus. Like I said, we might have XIO and Brian Campbell joining us, but in the meantime, I think we'll just press ahead. If we start with UMIP 216, or if there's any preference to order. You're muted, Matt.
Oh, sorry, I wasn't. I was talking to someone else. Sorry.
Oh, sorry. Will we just start with UMIP 216?
Cool.
Okay. Oops. Uh, 216. Okay, there was quite a few questions around this left in the Discord. Thanks ever so much to Rainus in particular for some of the input that he gave to this. Yeah, there was quite a lot missing and a lot of issues over the reliability of the DeFi Pulse Index. People weren't very sure that DeFi Pulse was reliable enough, whether they were tracking all the contracts, if there could be jumps, and also other chains. And there's also quite a lot of missing information.
Oh, I was just going to say, on top of, I guess, like the formatting and fleshing out the details, I think a lot depends on what the intended use case of this is, where, for instance, if you were doing KPI options based on TVL, maybe that's not a problem if there's discontinuous upward jumps. It's just sort of a thing that you're watching over a period of months. But if it's like real-time speculation on whether the TVL is going up or down on a particular day or a particular hour, that would be a problem. So in some cases it's a problem, in other cases it's not, as long as everybody's clear on what they're using the price feed for.
Yeah, I think from some chat in the Discord, it was generally considered to be KPI options, but I wouldn't say definitely. And also, if it gets accepted as a price feed, it could be used for other use cases. So even if the motivation was to do it for KPI options, somebody else could implement that price feed for a different contract for a completely different use case.
That's a great point.
Yeah, definitely.
So my question around this is, are we, so the idea behind this price identifier is that we're trying to figure out the TVL of different projects?
Yes, there's a list of different projects, quite a lot of them actually, 10 different projects, all quite big names, a few smaller ones like Opium and Dodo, but most of them are pretty big names. But they can have quite big jumps in TVL at certain stages.
Yeah, and so the difficulty, I guess, sounds like it is we have a choice between using a really centralized provider who kind of does this curation for us, or we could, like, for each one of these have a completely distinct method for computing TVL, right? And that and the idea, and I guess the problem with that is, like, it's just really complicated and difficult to spec out, right? It's a lot of effort. Could we, instead of, maybe there's a middle ground, could we use like are there three different sources of TVL that we could use, like three distinct providers that all provide TVL, that we could like medianize or average?
It doesn't seem like it. It seems like there's two providers and one of them only provides daily reports. So we have DeFi Pulse, which does hourly, and then DeFi Llama does like daily, and that's included there as a backup in case something goes wrong with DeFi Pulse. But there might be problems with that too, where if you're trying to make a specific bet on the DeFi Pulse TVL, knowing that it's really complicated to calculate what a TVL for a project is anyway. And there's not a whole lot of good industry-wide standards or agreement, and we're only barely getting to the point where there's multiple providers and they are going to have pretty different numbers. That kind of complicates the risk that you're taking on at the same time, because if you're going to the fallback might be a completely different calculation. So thinking about it more, it's almost, to me, like you might not want to have the fallback if the fallback is so wildly different, and it's really just based on a centralized provider's constantly changing calculation of what TVL is. I don't know. It's really hard to say for this one.
I can't find the comment, but I think Anu also mentioned that there was data missing from DeFi Llama, that certain days they didn't actually report a price. I'm sure I read that somewhere, but I can't find it at all. But I'm not convinced that it's a very reliable source.
Mm-hmm.
Does DeFi Pulse share their methodology for calculating? Like if DeFi Pulse just went down, could you go and use their same method to try to figure out what they would have said?
As I understand it, DeFi Pulse asks each protocol how they would like their TVL calculated. So in theory, yes, you could go to the protocols and say, how did you say to DeFi Pulse you wanted your TVL calculated?
Yeah, because I feel like that might be a better backup than DeFi Llama, where if DeFi Llama has a different method of calculating it, then you just have to treat those as totally different things almost. Like they're both theoretically TVL, but they're really not looking at it the same way necessarily.
Yeah, I think it also might be like project specific. So maybe as a backup, it would require for each of these specific DeFi platforms to specify what's like real underlying TVL is. Like in comparison, as for UMA, we also have like different treatment. For example, this which parts we count or which parts we don't count, and for observer from outside, it's really hard to know it if it's especially behind some centralized party. So if here in UMIP we have some more guidance per project, maybe then it's also alternative how to deal with that.
Another complication was that some of these protocols have significant volume on other exchanges, like Binance Smart Chain. And it's a bit unclear whether that's being reported by DeFi Pulse or not.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, so previously we had passed a couple of DeFi Pulse related price identifiers, and those were a little bit simpler, but probably also shared some of the same downfalls of this one. They were simpler in that, like, when you're calculating the TVL of all things in DeFi, there could still be price gaps, but it would probably be less so than doing it for one project, right? Mm-hmm. And it's also extremely complicated to calculate the TVL for all projects across DeFi. So it seemed reasonable to use like a centralized source like DeFi Pulse. And it was also kind of noted in the name and the UMIP that like this is specifically about like DeFi Pulse's TVL calculation, not about like trying to get the truest TVL calculation. Because it's like people have said, it's pretty hard to define that. Now for the project specific ones, I don't really have a great answer to like the price gaps thing, because I think Anu does bring up a great point around like just a simple change in DeFi Pulse's methodology could result in like, you know, massive increases or decreases in TVL, which would be pretty difficult from like a financial contract standpoint. The other kind of unrelated comment that I have here is previously when like the sushi TVL was being proposed, it was recommended that that get combined with something else to make it kind of more interesting or like usable. Because when you're just proposing like one contract's or one specific protocol's TVL, it is kind of interesting to think about because like I don't know if anybody would actually go short on any of these things, right? It's kind of a one-sided market where almost everybody would only be long on it. Yeah.
I'm not convinced actually, but yeah, I can see scenarios where people would go short.
Okay.
And I don't think
That's
you
fine.
can rule it out that people could. But the jumps are a problem. So is that basically a no-go and go back to Brian and discuss some of these issues with him?
I think so, yeah.
Okay.
I guess, and go ahead, sorry.
No, you go.
Oh, I was just going to say to your point too about the earlier price identifiers being specifically for the DeFi Pulse TVL. The more I think about it and discussing it on this call, the more I think that we shouldn't have like a backup that goes to a different centralized source of DeFi Llama, and that we should look at it just purely like this is the price from DeFi Pulse because that's the data point that we can track as long as their APIs online. And I feel like that does make more sense just because the calculation can really change depending on their methodology.
Yeah.
And maybe bring that back to Brian to kind of discuss around that.
So maybe the backup isn't like another source with another methodology, but like say the API went down, then the backup would be like the last available data point or something like that.
Yeah, that makes sense. Unless there's like something that we could, it's a lot more work to go and try to like calculate it the way that they calculate it. But if they do have a public methodology for calculating it, then that could also be theoretically a backup, but you could just say last available data for simplicity.
I also think that some of these protocols, like Anu was noting, like was talking about like compound specific TVL calculation, like they themselves might make these available, which would make it like feasible to actually, pull that TVL data from the protocols themselves instead of DeFi Pulse, which wasn't really feasible when you're trying to get all of DeFi.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. I think when that's possible, that would probably be a more compelling price source or data source.
Okay, so we'll leave this as a no-go for now. Go back and chat to Brian about the possibilities and how we might resolve this. Everyone happy with that?
Yeah,
Cool.
I think so. Even though
Yes.
I do think we need to do some thinking around how to actually resolve this because I don't think we have a super clear answer.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I think the next step is really to talk to Brian, though. I don't think there's anything more we can do to resolve it in this call.
I agree.
Okay, welcome to Zach and to Anthony from XIO. There's two
Hey,
more.
guys.
Hey guys.
Hey guys, thanks for having us. Sorry for jumping on a little late here and just fascinating listening in on the background. But yeah, just for a little quick introduction, my name is Zach and Anthony. We're with Block Zero Labs. Obviously, we've got a fun accelerator program over the next few weeks. And so we just wanted to jump on today and try not to be too much of a headache and just come on here and listen in. But you just after, just wanted to say in the last few weeks, we felt nothing but welcomed from the UMA community and just everywhere we go on Discord. I've been gradually transitioning from Telegram to Discord. Don't shun me for that, but I'm still getting used to it as a habit. But just wanted to say, we really appreciated the community and we're excited to do some fun things together.
Thanks, Zachary. We're excited too.
Nice to have you on the call.
Sure. So Vari, I don't know the traditional flow of this, but I'd love to make sure I don't interrupt too much and see if there's any kind of context or anything that we could help with on our end, or if you already have an agenda in place, we could come in later as well.
Well, usually we just go through the UMIPs, discuss the points that people have raised on the GitHub. And sometimes, you know, if the UMIP creator is there, then we can resolve the issues there and then. Or sometimes it needs a bit more thought. Okay, if we go now to the 218, this is the adding XIO as a collateral type. As far as I could see, there wasn't really any significant issues with this. There was a question that somebody brought up about whether or not sponsors with XIO locked in EMPs would be able to vote and interact with the redemption mechanism. But I think that's more related to the XIO governance procedure.
Yeah, I think that's definitely more related to, I'm not sure if they're referring to specifically the index that we have or the snapshot page governance, but I actually haven't reviewed those comments. I'll definitely jump in after to see what that's about. But yeah, it doesn't seem specifically for this specific proposal here.
I also don't think it's like a blocker. I think somebody was just asking for like clarification out of curiosity.
Yeah, and just to get ahead of just being transparent, we thought that the biggest friction point would be ever since that we started our liquidity pool, our liquidity mining program, we've been 100% focused on Uniswap. So that's kind of our central source in terms of price and everything that we do. And we've specifically chosen not to do. So I know that you guys traditionally, it would help to have, the protocol at least would help to have multiple different feeds and angles. So we are listed on some of these other centralized exchanges that we don't trust as much. So the biggest internal debate that we had is, should we include those or not? And so for the initial proposal, I believe, Anthony can correct me if I'm wrong, but we decided just to use Uniswap for that.
Could it just, that's actually the next UMIP. Could we
Apologies. Yeah,
no bother.
Apologies, go for it, yeah.
Could we just check that everyone's happy with the collateral type with 218? Is that a go?
Yeah, I mean, I think the only thing we typically worry about with collateral types is whether the price is going to go to 0 tomorrow, and the collateral type can be used to spam the oracle. So it's pretty uncontroversial as long as it's like a real token, a real team. Like, so yeah, all good, I think, from our end.
Cool.
I agree.
So
the final fee checks out as well. So
excellent. So 218 is go. Okay. And then the next one is the price identifier. If I just get the assessment up. Okay, there was some questions around rounding. Oh, have I got the wrong one? Is that 218? 219? Let's see. This is 219. Okay, we've got questions on pricing interval, input processing, results processing. And then there's also questions around the sources, because CoinGecko and CoinMarketCap are showing quite high volumes on Who and Bilaxi, which aren't exchanges I'm particularly familiar with.
Yeah, so just for context with those two exchanges added us without our permission, or without asking us, and so we have zero relationship with them. We are also unfamiliar with the quality of their data and their volume as well. So that's why I think strategically we just didn't want to include them. I think there's greater chance of manipulation on those, obviously, than on Uniswap. So that was kind of the decision for that. I will also mention that the person who submitted that, his name is Krasimir, who is not on this call right now. So any super more technical questions that we would need, we might have to circle back with him. But specifically for the exchanges, was there any additional clarity or kind of answers that we can put to that?
Yeah, I mean, I think in the best case scenario, we would have 3 sources, right? And be able to medianize those. But if they don't exist, I mean, I don't really think, if like 3 trustful sources don't exist, then there's really nothing we can kind of do about that within the price identifier process, right? And I noticed you guys did add in a TWAP for pricing on the Uniswap pools, which I think is like a reasonable compromise around like trying to prevent manipulation. Yeah, it's just my perspective.
Yeah, just to add to that, those exchanges are definitely not, well, I would agree with your assessment that they're not super trustworthy, and like whatever volume numbers they're giving, like I wouldn't put a lot of credence to them. I think Uniswap is actually like, it is the gold standard of exchanges because there's really no way to fabricate the data or manipulate it without, the order book is very obvious. Like it's very simple. You can't manipulate it without actually like really pushing trades through. So I think that if there is an exchange that you're going to rely on, if it's going to be your single exchange, it's good for it to be Uniswap. And a TWAP makes it very expensive to manipulate. So the only thing I think you'd want to watch out for is, and I think you want to watch out for this even if you're medianizing multiple exchanges, is just that the size of this synthetic market doesn't get to be so big that it's quite profitable, or it's profitable to like manipulate the Uniswap price and hold it over that entire TWAP at a different price so that you can change the value of the synthetic. But generally, we've never had a problem where the synthetic market gets bigger than the spot market. So I don't think this is really a concern, and we can kind of cross that bridge when we get there. The other thing I'd mention is that the DVM voters will generally consider manipulation when they vote. So if they think that the price was obviously moved around or obviously manipulated, that comes in that broad market consensus line that we typically add to UMIPs applies there. So we would basically say, well, this price is not actually, the Uniswap TWAP price in this case does not reflect broad market consensus. So we're actually going to like, the voters can decide to give a price that they view as more accurate. So I think in this case, with the size of this market, I think it's totally appropriate to just use Uniswap, especially if it's like far and away the most liquid and most expensive to manipulate. In fact, it would probably make it less secure if you added other markets, because you could just manipulate the 2 lower volume markets instead of manipulating Uniswap, and that would be cheaper.
Yeah, that's exactly. I think you hit that point right on the head, where we could have, in theory, tried to push, $10,000, $50,000 on Balancer and then Sun on Sushi, but I think that would have caused. It would have been easier to manipulate at that point in time, unless you had some weights in there as well. So that was kind of our logic to having it all in one place. And then just one last thing I will add: we've had this pool since October or November of 2019, and it's one of the kind of most diversified participants in terms of like liquidity providers. I think there's over 250 people that have in, very equal amounts. So if you ever look at the pie chart, it's very distributed as well. So in terms of like liquidity being removed or pooled, if that was a concern, that's one that we're pretty confident in as well.
Okay.
Very cool.
It seems like people are quite happy with taking the Uniswap thing. The other question was about rounding. Sean, I saw that you left a comment about rounding. There was intermediary rounding on the on the results processing. Is that right?
Yeah, my suggestion was just to standardize the rounding amounts for the price identifiers if it made sense. Like right now, you're rounding to 18 decimals for one price identifier and 6 decimals for the other. And I just feel like 18 decimals is unnecessary for like the level of precision that it gives you. And then also just noting that like when you're calculating XIO, USD, and rounding to 6 decimals, right now it kind of reads that like you would use that rounding amount and then take the inverse to get USD XIO and then round that again, which I don't think makes a lot of sense for the USD XIO price ID. So just a couple small things.
Gotcha. Yeah, in terms of the rounding, it's an area that I'd love to connect with Crass and see his logic behind it. But Anthony, now that you're on the call, I'd love to take that feedback that we just got there and then run it by Crass and see kind of his thoughts on it. I wasn't aware of his decision to do that, but yeah, I'd love to pick his brain real quick.
Yeah, I'll run it by him.
Cool. And definitely not a blocker, like just a very small thing.
And another small thing that someone brought up was where is it? Yeah, the implementation section needs the pricing and interval and input processing as well.
Yes, but it's mostly, I think, formality in this case, just to be compliant with the guidelines of template, but just stating that there are no like additional processing, just checkbox on that.
I think it was actually in another section. It was just in the wrong section, which is just a cut and paste job. So we're good to go in that with minor elements?
Yeah, I think so. I also think like noting something about, like it's kind of talked about in the security considerations section, but probably something within the implementation section around like kind of the typical broad market consensus shtick that we use, and the fact that like, you know, it might be necessary just because we're using like one price source. I think that would make sense, but that's just kind of my personal opinion.
Can I get quick clarity on that? I don't think I was following the very beginning. What's the specific suggestion around security? I think I might have misinterpreted it as like a security token, but you're talking about the actual security of the price.
I was talking about the security considerations section within the UMIP.
Okay.
And just within some of our other UMIPs, you'll see this like kind of consistent language around like voters are kind of free to define broad market consensus, and if it seems like the price kind of differs from that, like in situations of price manipulation, then like they're kind of, it's like up to them and their responsibility to define that and like pick an alternative way to calculate the price.
Got it. Thank you for clarifying that. Yeah, I'll take that back to Crass and see if he has any more additional comments that he can put in there.
If you have a route around in some of the other UMIPs, you'll see there's a kind of standard thing that people put in. So another copy and paste. So that one, hi Moises. Moises just joined us, although we're nearly wrapping up. But it's good to see you on the call anyway. So that one is good to go, just with a little bit of clarification.
I think so, yeah.
Cool. Excellent. Anything else anybody would like to raise?
I think just my last comment, I'm just mesmerized by the governance process. We're in the process of trying to get to the level that you guys are at now with these conversations and going through the formal process of a proposal. I'd love to just get like just a personal curiosity of mine. It sounds to me you guys bring your minds together here on this call, and then you give up a green light or not. But where in the process so like, let's say that you guys in this specific call wanted to agree to something but the community did not. Where can you explain a little more about the governance of it? I'd love to get clarity on what that looks like.
Yeah. So like we kind of have this deadline in the week preceding when the voting week would be. And that's when, like, as you're probably aware of, and that's when like the UMIP would need to be submitted as a draft. And that kind of gives anybody in the community time to review that and add any sort of comments or like hesitations that they have at that time. And then this call is supposed to be like an opportunity for anybody to come and voice their concerns. So not just for UMA team members, but literally anybody that wants to come from the community. So like the decision that we come to on this call is kind of used as like a guiding tool around like, this is what the people that have reviewed this think, and like, this is, we're like going to proceed with this vote or not. But then also after this vote, like people get alerted that, you know, this is going up for a vote this week. And that's like, honestly, when most people go and review these things. And if like, if, you know, more concerns come up at that time, we have had situations where we delay the vote then based off like community feedback.
Got it. Yeah, thanks for that. We're just trying to learn so much about how other projects do it. And this, ever since we got brought onto this one, it's been pretty clear on what we need to do. So yeah, just wanted to learn a bit about what you guys do and try to implement some of the takeaways. I'm always just interested if there gets like one of these meetings where there's like a huge, you know, people like disagreeing on a big topic. It's just interesting, the resolution of that and how it comes to be. But I think I'm gonna, if you guys don't mind, personally, even after this accelerator program, jump on these calls and just listen in to what you guys are up to.
Absolutely.
You're very welcome.
Awesome. I'll get to know each of you individually over time, I'm sure.
I'd also like to add one small point here. The process here is kind of more, I would say is somewhat informal, but it's built around a more strict process that is actually like built into the bylaws of the UMA Foundation and the UMA protocol. So technically, the way UMIPs or the way these proposals work is that a 5% quorum of voters must want something to go up for a vote for it to go up for a vote. That's kind of assumed if everybody is pretty happy with it. It's assumed that there's going to be a 5%, and technically, like, you know, there are certain members of the UMA team who you know, the UMA team altogether has more than 5% of the tokens. So we can kind of assume that if something passes the UMA team's review, then it has quorum. But technically, that quorum is required to go up for a vote. And then once it's up for a vote, it must get 50% or more of the participating voters to actually be passed. And then more than 5% of voters must participate in that vote. So yeah, that's like technically how the process works. But this meeting and all this is kind of the structure we've built around it. That's a little bit more informal and less strict, but we think it works well for kind of helping get things through the pipeline and kind of trying to abstract away some of those technical requirements, so that the people actually building on us don't have to worry about that.
Yeah, that's just those numbers you pointed out were really interesting, how they were chosen, the 5%. And because we were playing around with, you know, you need 10,000 XIO tokens to make an official proposal to the network. But I like the way that you've done this more, because that number is going to go up and down over time in terms of price value, and it could be harder to attain or easier to attain. And so I think the 5% is interesting, especially when I think Uniswap has like a very, very high threshold of voter turnout that has really, I feel like, disempowered a lot of people to feel like they can actually make an impact. So yeah, I'm just super intrigued about the power dynamics of everything and how you guys have influence on the project, and people like that there's influence because you can organize quicker and you guys can push through things faster. But if you're too influential, then people don't want to, you know, I guess it's every issue every country has ever had in the history of man, but it's pretty interesting.
I think it's also good to try to give the vibe that this is a collaborative process, that like these proposals don't need to be controversial. So as we're reviewing it, it's not like sitting in judgment of a proposal. It's trying to think through all of the angles of it together as a community and bring people into that process. So the more it has that feeling, the better. Because there's no reason that things should be going up for a vote and like a 70-30 split. Like all of the issues that might come up in a UMIP can be resolved, or we can all just sort of agree that there might be like different things that need to change before it would be ready. So as things go through the process, they just get stronger and everybody hopefully feels good about it.
Sure. And you can say that, and I think that you guys have gotten to that point, but it's really hard to implement that culture where it's not a conflict, it's not a battle, it's how can we actually push this forward, and that takes a lot of time. I just wanted to say, you know, we've been trying to implement that, but it only takes a few kind of crazy, you know, community members joining in that don't know the culture that you have that can throw all that off. So yeah, that's awesome that you guys gotten to that level of like, what's the best for the project, and let's get to a consensus on that.
Yeah, and I think it's also helpful that the way that you know, collateral works, that it's pretty easy to get like every decent collateral through. So it doesn't need to be this controversial thing where everything depends on the stability of everything else. If you have like a multi-collateral type thing. And then the price feeds, it is pretty objective. Like, is this something you can calculate or not? And like, what are any technical problems with it? Where I think a lot of other governance decisions, where if people are like tweaking a lot of other aspects of a protocol, you could actually have controversial political things versus like literally, can you do the math on this or not? Can you get enough of this to do liquidations or not? And that kind of thing, because you can just look at that and figure it out.
Have you guys removed collateral before?
We have not.
No.
Okay, gotcha. Just wanted a data point in my head on that. Yeah.
I mean, the thing we're going for long term, and I think from the beginning of our project, is governance minimized. We want to have as few things pass through governance as possible. We'd like to be as much like Ethereum as possible, where it's like an open platform where you just kind of deploy your thing and run your thing, and then we kind of get out of the way. And obviously there's still a governance process that requires some stuff to be done for deployers such as yourselves, but we'd like it to be less and less. And we'd also like to make sure that, like John alluded to, like your proposals aren't going to hurt anybody else. And so if we can kind of make our system sufficiently decentralized and sufficiently modularized so that your contracts don't interfere with anyone else, and your contract also has a very low chance of being able to like hurt our DVM and core Oracle system, then that's the best, because then there's no conflicts, right? You don't care that like about this DeFi Pulse index TVL tracker thing that we talked about earlier in the call, because like it has no effect on the contracts you're deploying.
No, but I found it really interesting because as I was listening, I was like, oh yeah, you got to figure out. Yeah. Anyways, I found that was an interesting conversation as well.
Yeah.
But I think what you just said there is core to what the UMA protocol is to begin with, where only discrepancies are brought to attention of voting, like on-chain price, like two people disagreeing on something. It's only brought to it when two people disagree. You don't have to check it every single block. So I think it's core. It's kind of what you're doing off-chain is kind of core to what you're doing on-chain. I think it's connected.
Exactly. Yeah, 100%.
Awesome. Well, it was really good to meet everybody here. Sorry if I pushed the meeting long. We just came out of a 2.5 hour meeting, and then Anthony's like, hey, we got the UMA call today, and he was like, it's at 5 p.m. I'm like, wait, is that UTC or what? And then we're scrambling to get on this call, so we made it.
Cool.
Well, I'm glad you joined.
Awesome. Anthony, did you have anything on your end, or we'll see everybody in Discord, I guess?
Yeah, no, just happy to be here. Happy I realized it's the right time. But yeah, it's just been fascinating to listen in to the whole process. So yeah, thanks for having us.
Excellent. Well, thanks again to everybody who turned up. And that's one no-go and 2 goes, one with slight amendments. Okay.
Great.
Bye.
Thank you all.
Bye, guys.
Bye all.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.